Our next panel up, we have Ellen Adair, Zach Hayes, and Adam Sloate. They are going to talk about a very interesting topic, the twisted state of baseball. Oh my lord. All right. You are all wonderful, and you know that. I just can't thank you enough for being here. But everybody else, you are wonderful, especially the ones who go to pitchlist.com/PitchCon and contribute to the cause and help us support Feeding America. So go ahead and do that if you haven't done it yet. But anyway, I'm going to get out of here. Good to see you guys.
Thanks. Thanks, Nick. And thank you, everybody out there, for donating to this wonderful cause. And I would just like to note that I was really much enjoying in the last one the Shohei Ohtani conversation because I am snuggling with my huge Shohei Ohtani pillow as we speak. But unfortunately, we're probably not going to talk about Shohei Ohtani this hour. So it is such a wonderful thing that Nick and the Pitcher List crew have put together where we can all talk about what we love so much about baseball. And it's really a week to revel in the majesty of a 40% CSW curveball as a complete hypothetical, or, the beauty of a rolling chart. But also, if you're just joining us, it's 2022. And MLB instituted a lockout that is currently ongoing. And I think that the constituency of people who think that we'll be starting spring training anytime soon is maybe dwindling. And also, Barry Bonds isn't going to be in the Hall of Fame anytime soon. And it's the Hall of Fame. But we are not going to be talking about that in particular. We are talking, as Nick said, about the twisted state of baseball. And with us on our journey through the dark forest, the straightforward pathway lost, I'm so lucky to be joined by Pitcher List writers and great minds Zach Hayes, who also writes for Southside Sox and Baseball Prospectus, and Adam Sloate, who also writes for the QB List, Pitcher List's football sister site. How are you both doing this evening?
Oh, chilly here in Chicago, but glad to be talking to you guys.
So happy that you're here. How about you, Adam?
Doing great. It's nice and perfect out here in sunny Southern California, so can't complain.
Oh my goodness, yes. We're getting like a historic spate of snow here in New York City. So we've just got the full variety of weather for you. So there is so much to discuss that I am pretty sure that the three of us could talk for like 5 hours at a minimum. But given that the owners and the players have actually met this week to try in varying degrees to come to terms on the collective bargaining agreement, and I think it's all in the forefront of our minds right now, I want to ask, how optimistic are each of you that the regular season is going to start on time? So let's calibrate this on a scale of 1 to 10, because I hear that that's a popular scale. And 1 is like you don't think that we're going to start the regular season on time at all. And 10 is you think that's absolutely going to happen. So, Zach, I'm going to throw this to you first.
I'd have to put that at like a 2.5, maybe. The only reason it's not a 1 or 2 is that we know that players have kind of been angling for a shorter spring training for quite some time now. So I figure maybe there's a small chance a deal gets cut out later than we expected and we can still get going. But I mean, let's be serious now. I don't think it's happening.
Yeah. Well, how are you feeling, Adam?
I like to be optimistic about things, and I really would like to be optimistic about this, but just based on the reporting coming out of players being willing to miss games and the owners not really budging, as far as I can tell, I would say probably like a 3, and that's with optimism baked into it. I think maybe once players stop watching football and the Super Bowl is over, maybe we'll get some more focused discussion. But to be honest, I'm not so optimistic either.
Wow. I'm really surprised because I think I used to be more optimistic about this. I think particularly the sort of like flurry of action right before the lockout made me a little bit more optimistic. And I have felt my optimism sort of dwindling. I think I'd still put myself like at least at an even 5 that I think the regular season is going to start on time. I think spring training is going to start late. I think that that's sort of a fait accompli. But I do feel sort of complicated about it myself, particularly since both sort of the historical precedent of other CBA negotiations and, as you referenced, the movement to the degree that we had this week, in terms of the players already giving up some of their requests and ownership not really doing that, leads me to feel sort of that, like, the more quickly that it concludes, the more likely it is that some of the issues facing the game that we all care about, like fielding non-competitive teams or, the middle class of players getting squeezed, that they won't be substantially addressed. So, I mean, I do understand that if real change is going to come, it is going to come incrementally. And I understand that, things aren't going to be transformed with this one CBA, but I'm still sort of concerned that an earlier date of this ending will correlate with what I see as sort of fewer desirable outcomes coming out of the CBA. So yeah, it makes me feel complicated. But if we'd like to be optimistic, at least for a moment, if we like to imagine the best, I am curious, what are, say, the 3 things that you would want to see most out of the CBA? If you want to pick less than 3, that's fine. And you can take this as like realistically or optimistically as you wish. So Adam, I'm going to throw this to you first.
First of all, I totally agree. I am concerned about, when things are shorter, there's like less of a likelihood that it's going to be a good outcome. And so that's what I'm sort of worried about, is that the shorter, the quicker we get to a deal, the less likely it is that it's going to be anything good. But as far as wish list goes, I'd say for players, I would be hoping for, some sort of addressing of the revenue sharing. I think whether that be through the proposed revenue sharing pool, or I'm not quite identifying it correctly, but the proposal that the players wanted to share like 105 million amongst like the top 30 high performing pre-arbitration players. I think that is a good goal. I mean, it's not going to get there, but I think revenue sharing, or some form of getting money to players that are pre-arb or early in arb and aren't getting paid anywhere close to what they truly deserve, is number 1 on my wish list for the players. But as a wish list for me as a fan, I think one thing that I would really love is an implementation of both a salary floor and the elimination of a luxury tax. I know those are wishful thinking, certainly wishful and very pie in the sky, but I think that would really help make the game a little bit more watchable for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Wait, did you have a third? Did I interrupt you too soon?
Oh, no, you're good. I chose to go with 2 here.
That's fine. That's fine. I think I threw the number at you just now. Zach, what about you?
Yeah, I would concur with most of what Adam just said there. Broadly speaking, and I think most of this is kind of pie in the sky until it isn't, given what traction we've seen. You need a total overhaul of the service time system. There's nothing really comparable to it across any other professional sport, where you have in the NBA and the NHL and the NFL, for the most part, the best players are already established in their major leagues by the time they're 21, 22, 23 years old, and their rookie contracts don't go more than 3 or 4 years at most. What the system that Major League Baseball has right now, that's both, based on when you reach the major leagues and then all of the twisted service time implications after that, is so far beyond what is, I think, the standard, that just needs to be, I think it just needs to be scrapped and started from scratch, personally. On some even more pie in the sky stuff, I would love to see the major league. This isn't really their job, but I would love to see some major league players go to bat for minor leaguers in negotiations. If we're going to talk about forcing owners to spend money and reinvest a lot of the money that they're bringing, which I think we're going to talk about in a little while anyway, I think you have to bring the minor leagues into that too. And I think that kind of solidarity is something that could reap great benefits for collective bargaining for both the major league and the minor league end. So I guess I don't have a third off the top of my head, but those are the 2 things that are at the forefront of my mind, I guess.
No, those are both fantastic. And I mean, really, it's true that I think both of the things that you both got to are really the core issues, I think, for any kind of smart baseball fan looking at the real state of the game organizationally. And I think that, the minor league thing is 100%. And I did not think about that here because I was like, oh, well, we're only talking about the MLBPA and that does not address minor leaguers. But I like your thinking outside of the box there. And, I do hope, honestly, that like in the next 10 years, we see the minor leaguers forming a union, even if it's like, we demand at least $250 a week or something like that. So, yeah. So for me, I think maybe I just said 3 because I imagined my CBA wishes as being the 3 wishes granted to me by the CBA genie. And I get that a lot of these are non-starters for the owners. So I'm glad that both of you also went sort of pie in the sky for yours. So that's why I'm using the CBA genie to get them. So my first wish is revenue sharing tied to a salary floor. So I understand that the players don't love the notion of a salary floor because they worry that it will lead to a cap, which is why a sort of proviso of like, I want a salary floor, but not with a cap is a really good wish. But I feel like if you tell the owners, you can get this revenue sharing money, but you have to spend it on player personnel. Like you could even tell them like, you don't have to spend this much on players, but then you don't get the money. And I have to feel like this would maybe incentivize owners to spend more on free agency and in arbitration. Like, I don't know, why not give the kid the extra $100,000 instead of wasting all of our time going to arbitration about it? I think just to give credit where credit is due, I believe that I heard a similar idea on rates and barrels, but it was some time ago, and I did not have the time this week to like go back and verify. So that's my first wish. My second wish is get players to arbitration earlier. I understand it's not going to happen, but this is my wish. And I am also open to the notion that Adam mentioned that was in part of the negotiations this week, that young players would get a sort of bonus pool money if they were high on the WAR leaderboard. In part because it avoids this sort of arbitration foolishness and also would get money to players who aren't even in arbitration yet. But I would want at a minimum the $105 that the $105 million that the players proposed. And I would want also the eligible number of players to be increased. So like the top 50 or something like that. So number 3, I would want to institute what I call the Jason Stark / Scott White reverse draft order for non-playoff teams. And essentially what this is like the best teams to miss the playoffs would choose first. Also, I have heard sort of proposed that all of the non-playoff teams would be in a lottery, but that the teams that were closest to making it would sort of have like more ping pong balls in the lottery rumble thing. I don't know what the name of that thing is. It should have a name. So this is also actually not the lottery, but the reverse draft order. This is what Scott White does in his 24-team Dynasty League. And so even before I saw Jason's excellent piece on it, I thought, for years I've been like, Scott White in his Dynasty League, they should do that in MLB. So I know that it is easy to be armchair prognosticators or CBA genie wishers in this particular case. So I'm curious to sort of turn this lens onto baseball media. What have you observed about how the media frames the lockout? Adam, I'll throw this over to you first.
I think actually Zach is kind of an expert in this category. I want to give Zach a huge shout out for his lockout pieces on Pitcher List, especially last month. He really killed it on those. So I would highly recommend it if you're looking for a really good examination of all the issues that, started the beginning of the lockout and I'm sure are still all prevalent. Words are hard to come by, I guess. But Zach's article is fantastic. But I would say one thing that I noticed a little bit, one thing that I actually enjoyed a lot was the piece from The Athletic a couple of days ago, where they kind of mentioned something about Dick Monfort kind of whining about not being able to afford some of the ancillary costs of a baseball, like security and COVID restrictions. That one really got me good. It was a nice little laugh as far as Lockout goes. But going a little bit deeper, the labeling of teams as big market and small market really kind of drives me nuts, because it's like, it seems a little silly to call teams owned by billionaires small market, or whatever you want to call them, low revenue, small market, whatever. I mean, yes, maybe they draw in less from TV deals, but that doesn't mean that they can't spend more. And so labeling them as like this, small market, to me almost seems like victim, or like people you need to look out for. And I kind of resent that label.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good point about the labeling of small market teams. I mean, I feel like particularly in the day and age of revenue sharing, like MLB has worked really hard to make it less relevant, and nevertheless, it's still kind of always being trotted out as being this problem. So let's go to the expert on this topic. Zach Hayes, what are your thoughts?
Don't you dare call me an expert. Thank you for the very undeserved kind words there. But there are two things I notice in particular that are both not particularly unique to baseball. They're reflective of where we are in terms of media as a society right now. Is that there is this, first of all, there is a rampant plague of both sidesism that gets thrown around most national reporters. And I think this actually kind of speaks to something you said a little bit earlier about the fact that the idea of a salary floor is, in our minds tied so heavily to a salary cap. And that's partially because we have this sort of idea drilled into our head that everything has to be tit for tat, that there have to be concessions made on one end to get something on the other. And that is fundamentally untrue. And that is only something that I think exists in our minds because of the way that most major baseball writers tend to cover these things, which is with the sense that these are two even-handed, equally valid, equally operating in good faith sides. And that is just not particularly true. And to that point, the thing that I noticed, and I wrote about this in the aforementioned article here, is that if you read some of these articles, especially from folks from The Athletic, who are writing for MLB, who are writing for, I hate using the word major media because it has kind of loaded connotation at this point, but regardless, look at their sources. Just read through the articles and see it's league executive, league sources. A GM said, you see very, very little from the player side of things. And when you do, it's usually from an agent or from someone who is not necessarily directly, doesn't have direct stakes in it. So I think our coverage and our even the way that we receive this information, where we think the state of affairs is kind of tainted by the fact that most of our information is really coming from league sources. And I don't think that's particularly clear through the way media presents things. But I think when you look closely, that's kind of what it is.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a really fantastic point. And, apologies for just recirculating a lot of the noise that's in sort of like the baseball discourse. That's just something that I've always heard about players being leery of a salary floor for that particular reason.
Oh no, but there's a reason that it is, like I said, there's a reason that those things are so forced together when they really don't have to be. That's not the players and that's not us,
Right. Yeah. No, what of course you reminded me is, and I think that we all baseball fans looking at what's going on with the lockout, what looms heavy in our very recent imagination is what we saw in 2020, in which it was so clear that it seemed like, at least, granted, this is from my perspective, it seemed like the players were actually trying to negotiate and the owners were just trying to repackage a non-negotiation. And I think that I'm very afraid of that happening in the CBA. And at the time, I was very annoyed by the both sidesism of it. I was like, no, this is the players being like, we want, $20, just as a complete hypothetical. And the owners being like, we'll give you $10. And the players saying no. And the owners are being like, how about if we give you $5 and then we give you $5? And the players are like, that's the same. That's still $10. So yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, I think that the both sidesism, you're so right, is basically rampant in media in general. Like it really frustrates me reading the New York Times, for example. And I mean, something that I've also been thinking about, about this sort of echo chamber that all of us who are concerted baseball fans and are always paying attention to what's going on, what I think I find myself getting stuck in is a kind of negativity echo chamber. And I've been thinking about, like, to some extent, is this just the nature of media? You know, like this sort of, could your smartphone be killing you while you sleep? Tune in at 11. Like, and I understand that in baseball, this is sort of personified most in the idea of the kind of cranky color commentator who just thinks that baseball was better in his day, or any younger color commentator who apes that because he thinks that that's what color commentary is supposed to be. Not that I'm thinking of any A-Rod in particular. But I've been wondering how much of even sort of smart baseball discourse is still based around that sort of echo chamber. And like, ultimately, and I'm only going to say this once, like, if I'm the same as A-Rod because I'm so used to a level of like smart analytical discourse that is negatively reactionary to the old time cranky commentary. So I'm genuinely curious because though I enjoy watching other sports, I really don't consume like discourse around their play or their issues. So to the extent that both of you do either of you feel like there's a different quality to baseball discourse than there is to that of other sports? Zach, I'll go with you first.
I was watching, I don't even remember who was playing on TNT last night, the NBA national game. But I was watching Charles Barkley and Ernie Johnson and Kenny Smith and Shaq and all those guys talking. And Charles Barkley went on a rant about, he literally said the nerds don't understand this. And I had to laugh because I was actually thinking about this question that you would pose to us. And I was like, maybe it's maybe not quite as unique as we would like to think. I think it's a general, it's a trend in sports in general. And baseball, I think, has been a little ahead of the curve in terms of things like the, quote unquote sabermetrics and the nerd takeover and things like that. That happened in baseball a little bit before it happened in basketball. And it's still, we're kind of watching it happen in football as we speak. So it's happening at different levels and at different paces, but I think the old fart media complex and that sort of thing is pretty universal. People are resistant to change. And, sometimes you just got to put up with it. And, they don't have to put them on Sunday Night Baseball, but they do exist everywhere, I think.
Yeah. I just laughed when you mentioned Charles Barkley because you're right that like in some moments that is what he has become, but he is also like one of the first men that I ever loved in my life. And I'll tell you my Charles Barkley story later. So Adam, do you have any thoughts about this?
I'm pretty much on board with what Zach said. I don't have a ton to add to that, although I do think that last night's game was Warriors Timberwolves, if that rings a bell. As far as the discourse, I think a lot of other sports have caught up in terms of analytic discussion to baseball. It used to be that, we would be talking about analytics and other sports would be like, what do you mean? Run the football, And so unfortunately, a lot of it has caught up, although I think there is always someone you can point to as being like the old fart in pretty much any sport. For football, I'm sorry, I'm just like really in football mode right now. It's like,
it makes sense.
We're in the playoffs right now. So I've got the most attention on that one, but one that I can think of is the CBS guys, Phil Simms and that crew. They're always, complaining about analytics and then, they just use the blanket word analytics instead of really breaking it down for us. And they're always complaining about, oh, why'd he go for it on fourth down or whatever? And then, it's just like, they never even had like any sort of courage to do it themselves when they were coaches or anything like that. So unfortunately, I think it's going to be, sorry to go off on a tangent there. But I think there's always going to be someone who's like the old fart and, you can kind of tee off on as like being out of touch or whatever. And I think that's part of their media's gambit is to get you to sort of be angry about it. So I don't know if that's ever going to go away. And I don't think It's very specific to baseball anymore, unfortunately.
Well, but I mean, in that way, like, at least we're not alone, right? Like, actually, your answers made me feel a lot better. Um, and I think it's just sort of like what makes good media is like people sparring. And I don't know that we as a society are going to get away from this notion that like the way to be smart is to show somebody else that they're wrong, which of course I don't love, but it's incredibly pervasive. So to now veer ever so slightly into another lane. If you could unilaterally change one thing about baseball on an organizational level, what would it be? So we're imagining like that this is a genie. You just get one wish though, and it's like you can change any one thing about the organization of Major League Baseball. Zach, what would you do?
Oh man, I've been dreaming of this one for a long time. As a bleeding heart commie, I would like to nationalize baseball. Not in a literal sense, but I call it municipalize some teams. I very firmly believe that teams, especially teams that have been in one place for a long time, are a very, very core part of the civic identity of a given city or a region, and people care about that. It means a lot to people, and and that's why we are where we are, because owners know this. They hold teams hostage. They say, "Give us a new $2 billion for a new stadium, or we'll move." They say, "You're going to have to give us all these concessions, or we're going to go out to the suburbs, or we're going to take baseball away from you." I very strongly believe that the people in a given location should have at least some kind of representative interest in the teams that they are deeply invested in. You can have another conversation about whether it's a good thing necessarily that we are all so deeply entrenched and attached to our teams, but I think that the holding of teams hostage because people love them needs to stop, and I think you need to give some kind of municipal add some kind of municipal element in there. I don't know what exactly that looks like, but unilaterally, like, let's make owners own a little bit less, if that makes sense.
I think that that's like the best idea that anybody could possibly come up with. Sorry, Adam. But yeah, I mean, particularly if you're having taxpayers pay for the stadium, it's the classic sort of making public the losses and privatizing the gains situation. Yeah, uh, absolutely. I wouldn't even begin to know how to make that happen. But that is like just completely out of the box thinking. Fantastic. Adam, what would your one thing be?
It's kind of rare to get sniped in a PitchCon discussion. I'm very accustomed to it as a fantasy baseball player getting sniped, I guess, but didn't expect it from Zach here. I'm really on board with the whole city ownership. I think that soccer has a really good idea of this. European soccer has a great idea of this in that the public owns, I want to say, like 51% of every club. And so, like, as much as, Manchester City is owned by oil money, the public owns that team more than any one person does. So I actually am such a big fan of that. But in the interest of adding more to the discussion, I'm going to quote Yoda and say there is another idea that I have. I told you I would sneak that one in there. I
You
would
did it.
say I did it. I was looking for it. My other wish would be payroll viewership, or just like an itemized balance sheet from every team. I think that being able to publicly bully owners into spending more on certain things, like if we could see how, um, the Yankees could spend their money, or how they do spend their money, and see that they're just raking in, however freaking millions that they are. We as the public, or we as the media, could sort of put pressure on them to, put the money where it belongs, or how we think it belongs. And so being able to see how much teams are truly making or how much they're truly spending would be, I think, like a very underrated way to make teams accountable.
Absolutely, and I feel like you could marry those two ideas where even if the denizens of a city are sort of part owners and there's still an ownership group of billionaire old white dudes who are getting some of the profits of the team. Nevertheless, if you could see exactly whatever they were getting, which probably you would need to if whoever were taxpayers in the city were also part owners of the thing. Like the two would sort of go together and mesh well, I think. So yeah, I mean, if this is like is it a white elephant gift exchange where you get to like take somebody else's gift? Like that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take that because I lamely just had put like, please pay minor league players because I felt like I couldn't fit it in the CBA question earlier. But yes, in this, I guess slightly more realistic. Who knew I was going to be the realist one here? The thing about that is not only is it the right thing to do, but something that I really took with me from the presentation that Daniel Port did last year at PitchCon on this sort of imbalance of the internal economy of Major League Baseball is that the cheapness of young players at the minor league level is part of what makes teams less willing to invest in a sort of sure thing veteran in free agency. So yes, that was my very lame choice that I'm not going to choose anymore because I feel like once we all own the baseball teams, we can decide to pay minor leaguers. So excellent. We're about at the halfway point of our twisted state of baseball discussion. So we are going to bring things to on-field play here. So, Adam, so that you don't get sniped this time, if you could institute one rule change to gameplay, what would it be?
I thought about this one for a really long time, and I don't have like a super concrete answer. I wanted to give a shout out to Miles Nelson for saying this, and I can't remember where I saw him say this, but more balls in play would be my general idea. I think it adds a lot to the excitement of the game, and just I would say that I have the most anxiety when my team is pitching with a runner on base from the other team, or when I've got someone on second base and I'm like, ooh, one single could bring him in. Just sort of the excitement around that. And I would really love to make sure that we can put more people on base somehow, or add a little bit of athleticism to the game. I don't really care about hitting a ball getting the ball hit into the shift. I mean, granted, I like it when my team gets, the shift works for them, but I think, giving opportunities for, players to make athletic plays, or like, more action on the base pass would be my very boring, very broad idea for how to make the game more aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, I was having a conversation when I was last on MLB Network, and the conversation was like, banning the shift, and I was like, I mean, I don't particularly want to ban the shift at any time, but I'm like particularly against it when I'm like, but what would that do to Ranger Suarez? Like very particular, like pitchers that I love that I feel like they need all the help they can get with the Phillies defense. This is the shirt that I'm wearing today, by the way. That is ladies love smartly executed defensive plays for those of you who are just listening and not watching. So what would your one on-field rule change be, Zach?
So I apologize if anyone came here looking for like really serious answers about what like might actually happen in the next year. But
I don't think that they did.
I don't know. Who the hell is listening to me? But what I would do, inspired. So I've been going down cricket rabbit holes on YouTube, inspired by the late great CLR James, and I think we should not. I don't know if expand the foul lines is the wrong word, but what if like you could hit the ball 10 feet to the left or right of first base and third base and still have it be in play? I don't know what would happen or how like specifically that would change the game. I feel like it would add a lot more strategy to it. It would make more different types of ball in play. Sorry, it would put more, oh gosh, this is a tongue twister. It would put more types of ball in play. And yeah, I don't know. It'd be, I think we kind of nitpick rule changes to death. Should we ban the shift? Should we not ban the shift? Should we do something about strikeouts and pitching changes? And I'm kind of like, let's run backwards around the bases. Let's just like, it's an old game. Let's switch it up a little on a more extreme level.
Yeah, I feel like it's this fiction that baseball is a game that has never changed. When it's like, what used to be illegal? Breaking balls. Like, you used to not be able to throw those. That was a long time ago. But also, like, there was Bob Gibson, and then they had to lower the mound. Like, there have always been changes made to the game. And so I am not necessarily opposed to changes that I feel like make the game more like the game that we love. Because to Adam's point, like, balls in play is the most exciting thing that happens in baseball. Like, it just is. And I feel like, personally, and so I don't want to put this on anybody else, but that I do feel like, as somebody who really obviously is super interested in analytics, love ultimately what they have done for the game, but this feeling that it is in some ways contributes to the kind of like 3 true outcomes version of the game that we currently have. I just feel I don't know, mixed about that, I guess, or like culpable. I don't know. However, for my rule change, all right, I've got one that I'm really going to pick, but then I've got a bonus one. And my first choice, it's wacky and it would never happen. And we've lost Zach for a minute, but hopefully I can just talk long enough until he returns. Okay, great. Excellent. So it is a modification of a rule change that I proposed when I was on the podcast back when it was on The Athletic. And it is an extra innings rule. So the 10th inning is played as it used to be, with no extra runner on second. And then if you're still tied in the 11th inning, stay with me, the team that scored more runs, not via the home run, gets a runner on second, and the other team does not. And if it's an equal number, then you go to like which team got more hits that were not home runs. And if that's still an equal number, then everybody gets a runner on second. But the thought here is that we would be lightly incentivizing teams to like put the ball in play without radically trying to change the game in a way that would not make, for example, today's statistics comparable to yesterday's statistics, which I understand is an important part of what we love about baseball. And I'd expect that mostly teams would try to win the game and not play for what might happen in the 10th, but who knows if it might just like shift strategy slightly. And my other change is not just larger bases, which I know have been discussed, but I would want like a cubic foot above the bag to also be considered safe if the runner has already made contact with the base. So essentially, I want to eliminate the situation in which base runners are called out because they beat the throw, but they like lose contact with the base for 1 millisecond while their body is physically above the base. It's small, but it drives me absolutely crazy. Anyway, so that would be a very lame one rule change to make, but that's why that's my bonus one. So staying with on-field play, how big of an issue is MLB tinkering with the baseball ecosystem or choosing when to police it? So how big of an issue is this? And also, what amount of the state of the game that we have today do you think can be attributed to this? Zach, how do you feel about that?
I think that the actual like tinkering with the ball is not necessarily a huge deal in a vacuum. The ball has probably been pretty inconsistent for the vast majority of baseball history. I mean, they were using the balls were misshapen in the 1920s because they didn't have a million of them and they were throwing them back in play all the time. I think the issue is that MLB is so non-transparent and they obfuscate everything and they lie to us and they say they do things and they don't, and they say they don't do things and they do, and they force things like I don't think we can answer this question without shouting out Bradford William Davis and Meredith Wills and their brilliant article exposing MLB's shenanigans with the baseball.
Total heroes.
And it's, the balls today are probably a lot more consistent than whatever the heck Babe Ruth was playing with. If we're being honest with ourselves, they're probably a lot more consistent than what we saw even 30, 40 years ago. But that's not the issue. It's the honesty. It's that they're not being forthright with us and the players. And on top of all these other trust issues that are building between fans and the league and players in the league, that's, if you're going to play that game, then yeah, you got to be consistent with it. So that's where the issue is, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Adam, how do you feel about it?
I totally agree with the transparency issue. I think it's particularly annoying. There's no way to spin that one. It's just irritating to me as a baseball fan and as a fantasy baseball fan. Trying to figure out, oh, was this the rabbit ball season? Oh, is this the sticky season? It's just driving me. Like drives me nuts, and I'm sure it drives people nuts that are much smarter than me trying to build models as well. So that one is particularly irritating to me. Although in the grand scheme of things, I'm not sure that's the biggest issue that we face, or even close to the biggest issue that we face as far as, creating a good on-field product. I think more so that it would be focusing on the economics of the game that would dramatically change the game. Tinkering with the ball, it creates more home runs or extra base hits or whatever. And so from game to game, that is interesting. But from a 30,000 feet perspective, I think I would, in the grand scheme of things, the tinkering is pretty minimal to me. I'm the minority here, but it's just like, it's annoying, it's a hindrance, but it's not the worst thing in MLB right now.
I completely agree, but I think it's been a question, and I know I was sort of going on about this earlier, but like, how did we get to the 3 true outcomes version of the game? How did we get here? And like, some of it is the rise of the analytical understanding of the game, which is like something that I personally love. I don't want to undo that. And also like certain players' scientific application of that, the launch angle revolution. And so what part of it is that? And what part of it is the fact that like at around the same time that, players were going to drive line and stuff like that, that MLB changed the ball to give it more loft, basically further incentivizing going for home runs. And, it's telling that it wasn't until by giving us a new ball, well, presumably we thought it was one new ball, and then actually we learned that it was like 4 or 5 different balls. I don't know. Maybe sometimes I have a problem remembering exact numbers. But I do remember learning that they were using a different ball for the Sunday night baseball games. And I was like, oh, I remember that one game where Francisco Lindor suddenly hit 3 home runs. And I was like, he's trying to save his season-long OPS. Mabel feels very strongly about Francisco Lindor. That is my dog, by the way. Mabel weighing in on this particular show. Mabel, thank you. She might just go off for a while. Yes, that in any case, they created the situation for themselves early in 2021 of suddenly there's no offense. I wonder why. We changed the ball. And then they were like, well, what should we do? Now let's crack down on sticky substances after we decided that we weren't going to do anything about it for years. So to go to something else that is also not the biggest issue facing MLB today, but nevertheless, it's part of the twisted state of baseball. So what do you think should be done about the sticky substance issue, Adam?
Tough question. I used to be a big, let's have all the teams play the games however they want to play. So I was like, oh yeah, let's do sticky substance. Let's let them all, wear Apple Watches, steal signs, whatever. Put it all in play because it's way harder to regulate all of it than to simply let them all do it. But I'm not really sure how I can reconcile that with being annoyed as a fantasy baseball fan and, the need for a more aesthetically pleasing brand of baseball. Because if things go the right, if we continue to allow people to have sticky stuff and change the ball, then it's just going to make it worse for everyone. And it's going to be sort of the brand of baseball that we've been seeing. So honestly, I don't know. I guess I am a fan of getting rid of the sticky substance, although I do worry that it's going to be really tough to continue to regulate every single thing that changes the game to something, less aesthetically pleasing. So I'm going to give a shaky eliminate sticky substances type of answer.
Excellent. I love shaky answers. They're the kind that I always give. Zach, do you have any feelings about this?
Yeah, I wouldn't trust a super confident answer. I say, as I prepare to say very, very confidently, just regulate it. Just give a universal substance, put some tack on the ball like they do. I can't remember if it's in Japan or Korea, or maybe both,
It's
where
Japan,
they
the NPB, definitely.
And I think they they had players go over. They did it in the Olympics too. They actually did a test run of stuff. A pre-tacked baseball during the Olympics, and the American players who went over there were like, "This is amazing. This is great. Why don't we do this?" But this is Major League Baseball, and it's too easy of an answer. So I don't know whatever the holdup there might be, but I think it should be that simple. Take the cooking substances up in a lab out of it. You get caught using something that's not what the league is giving you, see ya. You have a tacked ball, you get caught using something, see ya. Just make it universal and make me never have to think about it again.
Totally. Well, I'm sorry for asking you a question and making you think about it for 5 minutes. I mean, to me, I think that the solution is the tackier baseball that you mentioned. That obviously, I don't know a ton about it, but I have heard from players that they're like, "Oh my gosh, this would be amazing. I wish I could throw with this." And I do remember, in when the second version of the ball in 2019 that the pitchers were complaining about how, they just absolutely couldn't get a grip on it. So, yeah, just create a tackier baseball and then nobody can have sticky substances. Obviously, I feel like one universal sticky substance would be the next best option, but then you're trying to police, what are you going to do? Like swab somebody and test it in a lab and have the results come back. So that feels less practical to me. So let's get into some of the impending changes to the game. And this next one feels like it is probably going to happen for those of you who have been following along with the CBA negotiations at home. But I'm interested how both of you feel about the prospect of playoff expansion. Zach, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, I could not possibly be more against this. This might be the one thing on here I feel the most strongly about, because I think it speaks very purely to a lot of the issues that we've discussed. And can you guys name one really competitively based reason why expanded playoffs would be compelling? I can't really. Can you just tell me? Go for it. Go for it.
I want to see Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette in the playoffs. How about that?
Okay, so they qualify automatically every year. I will grant them. And we'll give the Shohei Ohtani exception there too. Those guys can be in every year, but no, it's a money grab, and it completely, in my mind, dilutes the purpose of a 162 game season. Where I think a lot of the argument you see now is that, look at teams like the Nationals in 2019 and the Atlanta team that just won the World Series. Those weren't elite teams, but they were still 90-win teams that won their divisions at the end of the year and ultimately deserved to get into the playoffs. And I think there is a big difference between something like that happening and when we see a 79 and 83 14 seed win a 3-game series and then go to the World Series. I think that's dumb. And I think I might be more open to the idea if it weren't so clearly just a revenue grab for oh no, there goes my camera again, for pretty much everybody. Obviously the players and the owners are both don't mind it because it's more, at least the owners want it because it's more money. But I just competitively don't see a real reason for it.
How do you feel about it, Adam?
This one I'm a little stronger pro playoff expansion. I'm sorry to break your heart here, Zach, but speaking from the heart,
controversy. That's what we need. The twisted state of baseball.
Finally, some discussion, controversy. Speaking from the heart as an Angels fan, I'm just dying to see my team in the playoffs for once. It's bad here, folks. But also as a general baseball fan, I don't see an issue with expanding it. Maybe not 14 teams or 16. That seems egregious, and that's when you get into the dilution of product. Sort of what the NFL runs into or had run into a couple of weeks ago with this addition of the 17 that was kind of weak. I realized that with the Eagles flag behind me, but I do like the idea of a playoff expansion. Sorry, go ahead.
I just said go Birds. Please
go
continue.
Birds. I do like the idea of a playoff expansion, maybe as a bit of an incentive, maybe to sort of not throw all your chips away if someone gets hurt, God forbid. But I'm just not sure how much teams are going to be able to do that if they know they're kind of set and are going to coast into the playoffs like Zach's team last year. I think in tandem with expanding the number of teams, you probably have to expand the number of games being played. I think I really enjoyed the 2020 take on, wild card rounds being best of 3 as opposed to best of 1. Like, it just seems criminal to send teams home after one game after they've worked so hard to get there. Like, I understand that's why we have the 162 game season, so that it incentivizes you to, win a lot of games. But when you have divisions like the NL West this year, to see like a Dodger, the Dodgers go home to the Cardinals if that had gone the other way, or to see the Giants go home in 5 games this year was kind of a little annoying to me as a baseball fan. At least, expand the divisional round, if at all. Like, if you're going to do one thing, it would be best of 7 divisional round. But I think I am A, pro playoff expansion overall and including more teams, but B, expanding the number of playoff games. I mean, I don't really see a downside to it besides maybe, the blatant money grab, of course. It hurts a little bit. And that the fact that we'd be playing games probably into November. But other than that, I'm willing to take the L there to see, these players that unfortunately have pretty poorly constructed teams around them sort of play a little bit longer.
Yeah, I think it's sort of interesting that like the two people in this discussion who are going to come out as kind of being pro playoff expansion are ones whose teams have not been in the playoffs in a little while, because as a fan of the team with the longest postseason drought in the National League, even with the expanded 2020 playoffs, I feel like there's a fan benefit for playoff expansion. And I understand the argument that it threatens the importance of the regular season, but I don't see it as a sort of a thorn without a rose. And I feel like obviously 16 teams is too many teams, but I don't think that that's even on the table. If I recall correctly, I believe that the owners want to do 14 teams and the players agreed this week to 12 teams, which is just smart because then they have some like an added bargaining chip as they move forward. But I think that this sort of currently proposed structure, which would have basically the two teams with the best record in the division get a bye, and then the division winners would get to pick their opponent for I think 3-game wild card series, which I think, like, I also agree that adding some more games makes sense, especially when baseball is really a game that is played on series and not on single games. It makes sense to have it be a 3-game series. That then the divisional winners would host those teams, would host the teams that they get to pick. And I just feel like all of the kind of like, it's the fun kind of baseball ranker to be like, ooh, who are they going to pick? And then, the fans of the other team get really salty because they got picked. Like, that's the kind of baseball controversy that I personally am here for. So I feel like that structure still incentivizes winning in the regular season. I would also, and I've wanted this forever, I would like a trophy given to the team with the best overall record in a season, sort of like the President's Trophy in the NHL, but hopefully everybody would care about it. And probably they wouldn't because, it would be just created. But I really wish that that existed as part of a like crowning achievement of the regular season. So another impending change to the game are robot umps. And I'm very curious how you both feel about this and what you think it will do to the game.
Oh, man, I just like the human element. I got no like super concrete reasoning for this. I think we just saw this play out in the Atlantic League, and I believe they also did it with a widened strike zone too. I'm not sure off the top of my head if those same parameters are going to be happening in AAA when they do the same thing next year, but it just seems like it's a lot, and kind of, can we focus on other things? Like, it's just because a few Twitter accounts go nuts every time an umpire misses a call that's like a half inch off the plate. Like, we don't need to make a big like this. I don't think ultimately is a super consequential issue personally. I don't think, if it happens, I'm I don't think it's going to particularly affect my enjoyment of the game. But I don't think it's really going to make the game any better either. So, take that as you will.
Yeah. How do you feel about it, Adam?
So they're more accurate. Great. It gets rid of some of the catchers that are pro framing or whatever. There are times when I'm pretty fired up about it, when it's one particular call. Again, that if it goes against my team, I'm very angry about it. But if it goes against the other team, I can kind of look the other way. Yeah, it's just like, if it happens, great. And I'm sure it will. So a couple of old white guys are going to be a couple of old guys are going to be out of jobs. That's fine with me. I don't really care.
They're mostly white.
Yeah,
baseball.
To be fair, yeah. I'm against it, but I'm not. I don't. I'm against it, but I also agree that I don't need to talk about it a lot. I'm going to move on because I realize that we don't have a lot of time left, and I want to know for each of you, and I'm going to throw this to Adam first. What is your favorite moment of controversy from recent seasons? Whether or not it should actually be controversial. Maybe it should be. Maybe it shouldn't be. You can pick it in either case.
Oh my goodness. I knew this question was going to come ahead of time and I still don't have a great answer.
Well, maybe we can go to Zach. Zach, do you have an answer?
Go to Zach first.
I can cheat a little bit because this is what I suggested. It is so controversial that a bobblehead here was made of it, and it is Tim Anderson and his bat flip. Because I think that really kind of put an exclamation point on it. It was the epitome of controversies that shouldn't be controversies. It is the epitome of what we don't like about the game in terms of the people who kind of dictate the informal rules and regulations and how things are run, and how that's really out of touch with what we as fans want to see and think is cool. And I think, of course, as you have probably figured out, I am also a White Sox fan, so that plays some part of it, of course. But I think that really sums up the whole thing. To which point I will say, as great as the playoffs were there last year, but the Phillies and the Angels do have more playoff appearances in my lifetime than the White Sox have in the history of their franchise. So I will, just leave that there. But Tim Anderson is the best, exposing unwritten rules for what they are, which is stupid, and that is my favorite.
That's very fair. And I'm just going to go ahead and give you another minute to think, Adam, because as long as we're on the subject, which this is a baseball thing that I love, is like more aggrieved franchise than thou. Like I love playing this game, particularly with my husband who's a Mets fan. So I am going to pick the Lindor McNeil Rodentia debate from 2021. So there are many things that I love about this. And number one is, first of all, the mere premise that however large New York rats might be, and I look at them scampering all over the subway tracks regularly, that there might be some confusion about the size of a rat versus a raccoon, like a rat or a squirrel maybe, or like very creatively like a rat or a lemming. But like a rat or a raccoon, like have you seen raccoons? Like raccoons move with a purpose that is more humanoid than rodent. The second reason that I love it is that the cause of this tiff was McNeil's dislike of the Mets' defensive positioning, which just, it makes me be a little bit more Team Lindor in the whole thing. But like that this was an argument over defense makes me, really happy. Because though I will agree that I'm not the most, Phillies fans are not the most aggrieved. It's been hard to be a Phillies fan for a little while. And I was sort of afraid that, with Cohen taking over with the very loosened purse strings, that the Mets would no longer be the Mets. And it remains to be seen what having the largest payroll in baseball will do for them in 2022. But it was a moment this past year when I relaxed, realizing that at least for that year, the Mets will still be the Mets. So, Adam, do you have any thoughts?
I think your guys' choices are far better than mine could have been. I do really identify with the whole Tim Anderson sort of showing off some of the unwritten rule nastiness. Fernando Tatis also does a great job of that as well. And I just really enjoy those moments a lot, just because I'm all for it. I'm all for the celebration, and I'm all for, unseating old baseball rules. Ellen, I do have one last little question for you that's kind of specific to being a Phillies fan / the experience at Citizens Bank Park. So are you pro crab fries? What's your take on crab fries?
Crab fries are great. Yeah. I mean,
It's kind of a bummer to hear.
any kind of fried potato, I'm not going to kick it out of bed. That's kind of how I feel.
And on that wonderful note, it is 8 o'clock.
Alas, I did not get to ask my last question, but that's okay.
Crickets, I'll tell you that. I just want to say really quickly, I am so for the cubic foot above the bag. It is the most annoying thing ever when someone claims the base and then their cleat comes off for like the smallest of millimeters. It should be like going to first base, unless they show an intent to go past the bag after they've initially touched it, then they should be safe, as long as they don't just like wander off like an idiot, right? It's so annoying. And also remove those stupid instant replays. So all for that. But Ellen, Zach, Adam, thank you so much. That was a fantastic
Thanks
panel.
for letting me talk to these cool cats.
Yeah.
Thank all of you.
Well, I wouldn't lead you astray, okay? You would.
I know you
would
wouldn't.
do it right. All right. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for being here. Talk to you later.